This video was written by my lovely wife Mary, no, not what's her name from Micronesia, and is being adapted into video form by yours truly. Effective music in Survivor can make or break scenes, episodes, and even entire seasons. We all know that Survivor has an iconic theme song, and we also know that each season has its own theme or story, such as David vs. Goliath, All Stars, Blood vs. Water, etc. Typically, the opening theme song, Asian Voices, is slightly modified to fit whatever the particular story of that season is. It's still recognizable as the Survivor theme song and always gives us a sense of adventure and excitement. So how do the people who make the show, the producers, or more specifically, the composers of each season, help enhance the story in the actual music of the episodes? Why do some seasons, such as Pearl Islands, have such memorable music, and yet other seasons, I can't remember a single song? Let's find out. Do you want to watch every video I make before it ever gets publicly released here on YouTube and pick what videos I make? Then join me on Patreon. You can sign up and cancel at any time, and heck, if you join for a year, you get a 15% discount. Thank you for your support. So in this video, we will analyze the musical themes of 4 different seasons of Survivor. We will talk about why the musical instruments or sounds were chosen for that season and how the music was used effectively or ineffectively to enhance the overall story of the season, because every season of Survivor is a story.
39 days, 16 people, 1 survivor.
First, let's start with one of my favorite all-time seasons so far, Season 7, Pearl Islands. Drenched in pirate culture from top to bottom, Pearl Islands has a pirate-based theme, and this is clearly seen from the very beginning of the very first episode. Any good pirate music has 2 main elements: violins with repeating motifs, and drums. Some other common elements that you might hear are ostinato bass, pipes or horns, an accordion, and often a men's choir. Now, just to clarify, I will try to keep this as simple as possible from here on out. A motif in music is simply a line of music that is repeated. Think of "Don't worry, be happy." The words "Don't worry, be happy" are an example of a basic motif being repeated throughout the song. So this song here has an ostinato, which is simply a repeated rhythm in the bass. In our pirate music examples, the violins will often play the same melodic phrases repeated throughout, and the drums, xylophone, or horns will be playing a low ostinato. If all this music jargon has your head scratching, and it does for the person who's doing this voiceover right now, just call to mind the first few lines of the Pirates of the Caribbean theme song, and you'll have a good idea of what I'm talking about. There is a dramatic violin melody with a big drum bass booming along, or you can just listen to the first few seconds of the opening of Season 19, Survivor Samoa, which in my opinion is just a few notes away from a copyright claim. In this opening scene of Pearl Islands, we have these main elements right away. There's a repeated motif in the violins, a heavy drum beat, a vocal chorus, and pipes. Take a listen. We are carried away not only with the music, but with the visuals to a world where pirates reign and treasures to be found. Russ Landau did a great job of updating the theme song for this season as well. Not only are the visuals all pointing to the pirate elements, but the music here marries the identifiable theme with recognizably pirate sounds. It starts with a driving drum beat that leads into the horn blasts. The violins take the lead at the beginning and continue as a dynamic force throughout the theme, culminating in a violin solo. The violin fades back down to become a secondary force through the end of the theme. There are also a couple of cannon shots at the very end, which were a really nice touch that I appreciated. Now let's take a look at how the music affects the episode itself. The opening challenge for Pearl Islands is very piratey in that each team has to go to a village and buy, beg, trade, or steal the things they need for camp. In this memorable scene, Rupert steals from the Morgan tribe. The music adds to the overall feeling that this is not a typical Survivor season. Also, you can't hear Rupert's voice and not think of a pirate.
This is definitely a pirate adventure. Pirates pillage. Pirates steal. Pirates take advantage. If they were going to be silly enough to put it right next to me, I'm going to put it in my thing.
Throughout this season, Drake and Morgan have very different approaches to the game. Morgan's uptight attitude and frantic energy often come back to bite them in the butt, but does the music at all emphasize this? Well, when Morgan first arrives at their beach, they are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Now, this is emphasized by the music by a repeating drum motif and some frantic pipe calls that will continue throughout the entire scene. The music in this scene is not cohesive. There's no melody or anything connecting it except for the energy of the drums. Subconsciously, we know that this tribe is expending a lot of energy with little reward.
Someone get down there, we scout out the area, get the fire going, and the heavier people can move the stuff, move the cargo.
Now, in contrast, when Drake arrives at their beach, the violins are ramping up into a pirate motif as the boat pulls into the shore. A relaxed pipe is playing an actual melody over a consistent, steady drum beat. It is a cohesive and recognizable song and tells us that people have their act together here.
I think that's it.
All right, guys, come on in. We're all here. We are to have the time of our life, and at the same time, we're gonna kick some butt.
Now, in this episode, there are some great use of sound effects with percussion instruments. Here, you can actually hear what sounds like water coming out of the coconut made by xylophones.
Does anybody have water? Burton opened up a coconut.
And here we have almost a Looney Tunes moment with Krista reacting to Sean being a bit bossy.
It's a waste to just have it lying underneath like that. It's not doing anything.
The other way.
I have a better idea.
These small things bring a lightness to the episode while at the same time underscoring the drama that is happening on screen. Next, let's take a look at the first challenge and see how the music affects it. As soon as the tribes head out, we again have repeating violin motifs and a drum ostinato. The lightness of camp life is over and we are facing the challenge. As Jeff introduces the challenge and talks about the idol, they added a violin motif which amped up into the idol reveal. I think that it adds a lot to the drama of the moment and at the same time stays within the pirate theme.
Okay, big enough stakes. Win this challenge, you're here 3 more days.
During the challenge, both tribes must transport a huge cannon through an obstacle course, assemble it, and then drag it to the finish line. If you were to close your eyes and only listen to the music here, you could almost imagine that this was a scene about a battle between the King's Royal Navy and the infamous Jack Sparrow's Black Pearl. And despite all these comparisons, keep in mind, this season came out at the same time as that movie. The music starts out strong and only builds throughout. All the main elements are present: violins, drums, pipes, and a vocal chorus. These elements ramp up every 10 seconds or so, culminating in Drake's win.
Drake wins immunity!
Finally, let's take a look at the music for Tribal Council. Here we are treated to the more familiar sounds of didgeridoo, drums, and a solo male vocalist. There are no violins and very few military drum sounds, something you might hear on Palau. We are returned to the tribal sounds that we are used to, and this might be as an effort to increase the apprehension in the audience. We all know how difficult Tribal Council can be, and adding the pirate theme may have come off as too fun for such a serious event. Personally, I think this was a missed opportunity. They could have included the violins in this as a subtle touch to round out the pirate theme, but we'll see something like that in a later season we'll talk about. Overall, I love the pirate theme of this season and the music only enhances the experience. The instruments chosen were perfect and you really feel the pirate mood. It's an experience that goes from the beginning to the end. You can literally click anywhere in the episode and you'll hear something that feels piratey. Not only is the pirate theme iconic, but it was effectively carried out throughout the whole season, and that's what makes it so memorable for me. Who doesn't love a good pirate shanty? Our next season is season 24, One World. Oh boy, or maybe, oh girl.
39 days, 18 people, 1 survivor.
In this season, all the players are divided into 2 tribes, but are required to live on the same beach. The tribes are male versus female. Now, this theme isn't as clear-cut as Pearl Islands, where we have lots of pirate music to pull from already. Here, they're gonna have to come up with something completely original. They really can't go hard with a boy versus girl theme here, as later in the season, the tribes are swapped, so it doesn't hold through until the merge. However, the tribes themselves still stay distinct. So let's take a look and see how they use the music to help with their theme of 2 tribes, 1 world. First of all, this season opens up with Jeff narrating the coming twist, obviously men versus women, but living together on the same beach, That's new. The music here is frantic, with lots of drums and energetic violins. There are 2 violin parts in particular, one high and one low. They are not playing the same melody, but rather are playing 2 separate melodies at once. This is actually a great subtle indication of what's to come. Also, the drums become more prominent once the first confessional happens, and that is from a male contestant. We will see why this is significant here very soon. Now, the theme song for this episode is only about 20 seconds long in the first episode, so it's not a great indication as to how the theme was modified for this particular season. There are other episodes that have the whole theme, but this is how they're starting off the show. When listening to the whole theme, we hear many typical instruments, such as the didgeridoo, violins, wind instruments, and also vocal chanting by a male and female chorus. In my opinion, there isn't really anything that's special or different about this rendition. It's still a great rendition, and I love that they're able to change it up each time and make it sound different while keeping the integral structure. I think the most obvious changes made are a deep male vocal ostinato chant has been added, and the wooden percussion instrument takes more of a lead in the melody. We can hear this male ostinato here. After the players are separated into their 2 tribes, they each try to head off in separate directions to their campsites, not knowing that they are heading to the same place. We start with the men and have a consistent lower drum beat, some low horns that repeat the same musical sound. There are also some violins that interject at certain periods with higher runs that go up, adding a balance to the lower drums and horns. This is a strong theme that sounds a bit warlike, and it does a great job of underscoring the men's tribe. We then see the women heading to their camp, and the music here has some low violins with a slightly higher wooden xylophone repeating the same chime pattern over and over. It goes back and forth between the xylophone and violins, playing low throughout. Has a more mysterious sound than the straightforward men's theme that played earlier.
Oh my God.
The women discover the beach first, and the music here is triumphant, violins with some horns and drums. Even though it is mostly the same instruments used here, it's different from the men's theme because it is less warlike and more celebratory.
Ladies, we are so close to the mountain in the clouds. That's crazy. Come on, it's
When the men and women actually join up, there is a wooden xylophone and some string instruments playing a confusing back and forth. It's simple and light. There are only a few instruments playing here, and there is no cohesive melody or sound. There is none of the drums or warlike sound of the men's opening theme, and only the confusing wooden xylophone.
Nice to see you, lady.
Soon after arriving, the 2 tribes are united in chasing some chickens who have crashed the campsite. The music here takes a total turn, and we have a fun hillbilly moment with lots of fiddles, banjo, and even a rubber band, all imitating that old-fashioned bluegrass sound.
Hey, you better not touch my chicken.
There you go.
There's even another fun moment where Matt is in a confessional and says, "There's a lot of manly men here," which is underscored with the music by a men's chant saying, "Yes."
There's a lot of manly men around here.
There are a lot of fun moments like this that the composer does a great job of adding into the scenes that you may not even notice, but do a great job of underscoring what is happening on the screen. Let's take a look at the confessionals because there's something interesting that is happening here. Now, during the men's confessionals, we will typically hear a low drum sound. During the women's confessionals, there's often the xylophone and also some lighter percussion sounds. Let's take a listen.
He has me cracking up in stitches, and if humor is his armor, then he has all of us sold like suckers, so I like it.
Now, let's take a look at the first challenge. Opening the challenge, we have some typical Survivor sounds. Drums, violins, pipes, and some chanting. The chanting, interestingly enough, is all male. The drums imitate more of the war theme we heard earlier in the men's opening trek to the camp. If you think that this might be indicating a victory by the men, you would be correct. One of the women actually gets injured in the middle of this first challenge. The men were in the lead when offered the choice to either continue the challenge or take the victory. The men choose to end the challenge or take that win. On a side note, there's a small drum roll when revealing the idol, but nothing like the Pearl Islands reveal, and a bit lackluster in my opinion, or at least nothing that added to the theme of One World.
First tribe to release their flag wins immunity and is safe from the vote.
If we go by the assumption that the drums are to represent the men's tribe and the xylophone is to represent the women's tribe, then throughout this episode we do have a pretty good representation of both. We often hear the lower drums accompanied by a higher xylophone when both are present. The music isn't very often melodic, but rather more like continuous sound effects throughout. At Tribal Council, we are once more back to more typical Survivor instruments such as violins, drums, percussion, and a men's chanting chorus. There's no xylophone that would represent the women's tribe. Now, there are lots of examples of music that has two opposing themes or voices playing or singing at the same time. One of my favorite musicals is Les Miserables, and there's a scene where the main character, as the person voicing the script, I'm gonna say it's Valjean, Valjean maybe? Don't kill me if I just said that wrong, and is confronted by Javert, and they sing a song together. They are both singing at the same time, but with different words and melodies. It is full of tension, it can also be slightly confusing, and yet at the same time it flows together into a unified song. I was really expecting to see more of this in this episode, and yes, each tribe did have assigned instruments, and they were often playing at the same time. However, there was no real melody, and it often sounded just more like someone banging away on some percussion instruments as an ambience, rather than a more recognizable theme. While I do appreciate that they did assign different instruments to each tribe and created tension by not having a recognizable melody, I think that this is one reason the music from this season just isn't that memorable, besides the fact that the season just isn't that good. It's mostly background noise. Next, let's jump back a few seasons to a real fan favorite. Season 20, Heroes vs. Villains.
39 days, 20 people, 1 survivor.
This introduction takes a little bit longer than most as Jeff is ramping up the drama for season 20. He talks about the South Pacific Island's beauty and uniqueness, but then also brings up how it was a battleground for hundreds of years, both with the indigenous people and also during World War II. He mentions how this is the perfect place for the season, leading up to an epic showdown. The intro is a dramatic buildup and the music is great. It starts out with a calm, ambient beginning, moving to more war-like sounds. There's lots of vocalizing, male and female, lots of violins and drums. During all the opening confessionals, the music maintains the battle sound, as I would call it. The music is energetic, cohesive, and warlike. The drums and violins maintain the same melody throughout. There are no obvious clues for an us versus them theme such as we had in One World, but it is early yet. Now here's where it gets pretty interesting. When the Heroes tribe arrives, the music is violin led with a higher recognizable melody that is major. If you watch the Dissecting Ancient Voices video, you may recognize some of those words. Basically, it's the soundtrack for a hero, strong, confident, and recognizable. When the villains arrive, we now have lots of drums, a low violin melody, and it's minor, the exact opposite of what we just heard for the Heroes. This was a great way to start off the show. From here on out, if anything typically heroic happens, there are usually major chords, and the opposite is true for villains. Now let's take a look at the theme song for this season. At first glance, not a lot has changed in this rendition. We have the opening horn blast, the choir singing the melody, violins, drums, xylophone, etc. We do have a bit of a more back and forth between the solo vocalists. One of the most interesting things to note is that when the first choir starts with singing the traditional lines, there's a key change after just a few seconds. Basically, they start singing the main theme, but then another choir comes in and sings it just slightly differently. This was a great subtle addition that emphasized the two opposing tribes right away. However, the thing that blew my mind the most was so subtle I had to listen to it about 10 more times to make sure I was listening and hearing the correct thing. However, the thing that blew my mind the most was so subtle I had to listen to it about 10 times before I was sure. The opening horn blast in this rendition is not a major third. It's a minor third. A major third is typically the happy sound, the sound you might use if you want to sound confident or joyful. A minor third is exactly what it sounds like, a more somber and mysterious sound. If that still doesn't make any sense to you, just listen to the only horn blast used for every single season of Survivor up until this season, and you will hear the difference. If that is not the most subtle spoiler I've ever seen, or to be accurate, heard, I don't know what is. The very first thing you hear in this season is the regular horn blast, followed by Jeff beginning his narration. The first horn is the regular sound of a major third. A few minutes later, we get the actual full theme song with the minor third. Very interesting. We spent a lot of time on the introduction in the theme song, so let's move on to the challenges. Right away, there is a reward challenge set for the contestants, and they are paired up, 2 from each tribe, and they have to race out, dig up a sandbag, and bring it back to the mat. Right away, we have a battle element. The music here is very supportive of the battle theme. It is similar music throughout with drums, castanets, pipes, and violins. Again, there isn't much of a melody here, but lots of what I would call violin ramps. It creates tension and underscores the struggle happening in this challenge. The pipes and castanets bring about a military feel. There's also a male vocalist that adds some chanting periodically. The music also has a lot of minor chords, but if you think, kind of like in the theme song, that that's an indication of a spoiler that the villains are going to win, you would be wrong. I think minor was chosen simply for the suggestion of a struggle.
There's one bag in this sand. You've got to find it, and you've got to get back to your mat.
And when the heroes win, there are some major chords. I think that it was a slight missed opportunity for more major chords throughout the challenge, but that's just personal preference. Now let's take a look at camp life and confessionals. As expected, the villains camp is mostly minor chords, and the instruments are drums and violins. As we get further into camp life and confessionals, we see the addition of the xylophone. We still have some low drums, but the violins take a backseat when it is simply basic things such as mosquito bites or playing the game. The music is all still minor.
I got way more to prove right here than I did last time. If I could do it here, if I can take it all the way, if I can whoop these all-stars, doesn't that mean I'm the best ever?
Now there is one fun moment at the villain camp that embodies some playfulness that really shows up a lot. Here we see some hints of Coach and Jerry having some romantic sparks flying, and the music hams it up with a Hawaiian guitar.
I've never in a million years would think about coming out on Survivor and actually being interested in somebody. But Jerry and I, we had a little connection.
There's another interesting moment at the Heroes camp where JT is talking about how he is willing to act like a villain in order to win this game. In all of his confessionals and short individual scenes with others leading up to this point, the music is always minor and ominous.
To win this game of Survivor, you have to have a dark side somewhere. You have to be willing to sacrifice some of your integrity to make it far in this game. And I'm not looking to save my hero name. I'm here to do what I have to do to win this game. So it's going to be a whole different ballgame for me.
We are shown that even on the hero tribe, there are villains. Later in the episode, we have what could have been a heroic moment of seeing Rupert out fishing, and yet the music here is ominous and minor. Rupert does mention how it's hard for him to fish because of his broken toe, but Rupert is definitely not being shown as the heroic person he was in Pearl Islands. We hear through Cirie that he has a huge ego, and for some reason the editors are wanting to undermine the heroic attributes of the hero tribe. This isn't just in the music, it's also in the editing.
Being able to get out in the ocean, that's where I feel most comfortable.
You don't want to say anything, you just sit there and watch because his ego's so humongous. What can you say?
Now at the immunity challenge, as soon as Jeff says villains win, we have some triumphant major chords for about 10 seconds, but then it ends with a minor clashing dissonance, reminding us that this is still the villains tribe.
Villains win first immunity challenge! Yeah, baby,
I thought this was a good choice as it's hard to sound triumphant in a minor key. Finally, let's take a look at Tribal Council. When the Heroes tribe walks into council, we hear a lot of ominous drums, high sweeping violins, and a male chanter, all in minor chords. This is hardly surprising as we wouldn't expect a victorious entry into Tribal Council, no matter what tribe. Here we have a continuation of the music from the season. violins, and drums. No vocal chanting and a few other percussion instruments. As Tribal Council progresses, there's an ominous synthesizer playing throughout with some light percussion. It sounds a little bit more like what we would expect.
She's grown into a bona fide threat to win the game. How do you defend that, First Tribal Council?
When voting happens, we are back in the typical voting music that never seems to really change, which is still great. Overall, I do like the idea of having the major chords represent the heroes and the minor chords represent the villains. The introduction is great and the change to ancient voices was really cool. There was also some great confessionals that had heroic major music for the hero and suspenseful minor music for the villain. However, I feel like it quickly broke down into using similar music for both tribes, regardless of who is on screen, or similar music for the challenges, regardless of who is leading. Is it difficult to mix major and minor chords? Yes, incredibly so. However, they did a pretty good job at the beginning of the episode, and then it kind of just tapered out by the end. Now that's not indicative of the whole season though, because there's some amazing music all season. That's just what happened here in this one episode. And what a great season it is.
39 days, 20 people, 1 survivor.
As I am sure you are aware of, Season 40 is the first time all the cast members are previous winners. It's the best of the best, brought back in a glorious battle for the one true survivor of them all. As you might imagine, this theme of the best battling out will inspire the composers to bring out a lot of battle elements in the music that we have heard in some previous seasons, such as drums, chanting, and maybe we will hear some pipes and cymbals also. This epic season opens up with a pretty epic opening. Think what you will about the song Coming For You. It was catchy and it set the theme for the season right away. Literally the first words you hear after Jeff say go is the opening line for this new song that was written specifically for the season by Jeff.
Go!
You better be ready.
This is going to be a big battle.
It's coming for you.
It's like the old days. 20 winners, everybody wants, it's not gonna be easy.
In this brief opening sequence, we have an ominous minor chord brought by the guitar, followed by the female vocalist, and then some electric guitar sounds and some siren sound. These are probably both synthesized. We then end with another minor chord on the guitar. This opening shows that we have some serious business about to happen. We then have a brief recap of the very first season of Survivor, mixed in with some footage of previous seasons. The music here has a lot of familiar sounds of the violin and drums, no guitar, no chanting, and no more electric guitar either. The section ends with the horn blast and a male vocalist singing the first 2 notes of Ancient Voices, but alas, it's merely just a tease, and as I said before, the full song is never played. After the reminiscing is over, we get to this season's contestants with a view of the all-male contestants on one boat. The only music we hear at this point is a drum line. This helps solidify the warlike attitude everyone has, as well as bringing a lot of energy to the scene. After the very first confessional, which of course comes from Tony, we ramp up the music with some violins and more percussion instruments. Now I could really go minute by minute talking about all the great musical things that happen in the first few minutes of the show. Suffice it to say, it is jam-packed. Once again, we get all of the winners on the beach and they meet up with Jeff. The music and the mood move to a celebratory tone. We have some marimbas come in with a playful melody that brings out the festive spirit. This is a really cool moment in Survivor history, and the music definitely underscores that.
This is awesome. Wendell, you applied many times to get on this show, and then you fulfilled the dream.
Once the contestants get split up into teams, the music once again becomes minor and ominous. Drums and percussion are more prominent, and there's some very low horn sounds underlying throughout. Now when Jeff announces there will be a $2 million prize instead of the typical $1, there is a brief moment when major chords come back into play.
How about $2 million?
So that was our opening sequence to this season. Overall, I'm a little disappointed there's not an Ancient Voices rendition for this season, but the music so far has been great. Now let's take a look at the very first challenge. This first challenge is for immunity and reward and has a lot of violins, drums, and some cool chanting in the beginning and throughout. One thing that is a bit unique about this challenge is that there are several violin shrieks. This occurs when the violinist moves their hand quickly from the lowest part of the string up to the highest and makes a cool rendition of a scream. You might hear the sound effect more often in a horror film, and so it isn't something that's used a lot here, but it does happen throughout the whole season. It is a battle, not a massacre. This challenge is a really long one, and the music holds up throughout with the minor battle chords and major chords underscoring the victories.
Hold them back!
Next, let's take a look at some camp life. Entering the Tikal camp, we hear lots of celebratory chords, arpeggios in a violin, a fun whistle, and some solo male vocalizing. We really feel the celebration of these Titans coming together. Everyone is excited and ready to go. Even with some moments of tension when people mention past hurts or betrayals, the music is still overall light and exciting. There are a few minor chords here, but it's so distant and light that there's not a lot of tension. Walking into Soleil, the tribe that lost the immunity challenge, we have minor chords, but it's fairly simple in that there aren't a lot of instruments playing at once. We have drums throughout with some violins and guitar, but the violins and guitar usually play at different times and don't overlap. It does still bring about the energetic feeling, even with the immunity loss. We have some really beautiful confessionals with people talking, and the music here softens up a lot with just the guitar and some percussion. I really like this moment because it emphasizes just how difficult this game is for most of the players. Obviously for Amber because she's playing with Rob, but we also have some of them mention how they are missing their kids or how it's been years since they have played, or how they battle cancer and are just excited to be part of this game again.
Going through cancer, it's hard, but life after cancer, that's when it really got tough. Fear of relapse, the fear of death, it's with you all the time. It's not a way to live your life. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm excited to see how I play in this new era of Survivor. And so I'm back, and I'm ready to play, and everyone better watch out.
We have a lot of emotional confessionals, and the music is always a supporting actor in the scene, making each emotion that much more memorable. Overall, the music throughout camp life and confessionals reflects the mood of whatever is going on. It flows effortlessly from fun moments to emotional moments to scared moments to strategic moments. The instruments used are varied, but not so drastically that it feels odd when you hear the next section. We hear guitar a lot more than in past seasons, and it is one element, along with the percussion and violins, that stays consistent. Lots of variety with instruments and with sound in confessionals. Entering Tribal Council, we have the tribal chants with violins and drums. This is more of what we're used to, but the chanting has ramped up this season. During Tribal Council, the typical sound returns. I think the Tribal Council almost always includes the pipes, drums, and ominous minor chords. It doesn't vary a lot here. When it is time to vote, the solo violin comes out with some strong pipes. I don't remember a lot of the actual voting times the violin took this much prominence, but I like it. Also, the chanting comes back in full force. This was really cool as I like how it ramped up. We feel the tension and unusualness of this season. Natalie gets voted out and we get our first look at the edge of extinction. As she pulls up in a boat, we have something unusual in that we have this mystical minor duet.
I don't think it's hit me yet that I just got voted off first.
Again, it's very different from what we have heard so far in this episode, but it isn't jarring or out of place as it uses a lot of the instruments that we are already used to from the other music, with the addition of female vocalists. We get the feeling that this is a part of the game, and yet it is a separate limbo, as Natalie calls it. Even though this episode does continue on with another challenge and vote out, I think the point is clear. Overall, I love the music in this season. It's energetic, warlike, celebratory, and beautiful. It underscores every single thing happening on the screen in a cohesive way that brings it all together. Nothing is really jarring or out of place, and it just feels as if the emotions of the players are being heard through the instruments. Yes, the lack of ancient voices is disappointing and probably this season's biggest flaw musically. And the song Coming For You, written by Jeff, is a little contrived and not actually great. The best part, in my opinion, is the opening line, and using that one section as the first thing you hear really did set the tone in the best way possible. So in conclusion, effective music in Survivor really adds to the drama on screen without distracting from it. It enhances the viewing experience, but doesn't overpower it. I really feel like we see this both in Pearl Islands and Winners at War, not so much in One World. Heroes vs. Villains does a pretty good job, but it's not as amazing in my opinion as Pearl Islands and Winners at War. When the music does what's supposed to, like in Pearl Islands and Winners at War, we really are immersed in the season. We feel what is going on and become participants instead of simply onlookers.